Chapter 29. The Rise of Bonaparte. Napoleon comes to power. While the British king and the Chinese emperor exchanged letters, the country without a king found itself ruled by a dictator. After Robespierre was sent to the guillotine, the National Convention of France gave up on making France into a country governed by all of its people. The revolution had removed the king and gotten rid of aristocrats, but it had also thrown the country into bloody years of war. Instead, the National Convention made France into an oligarchy, a country where only some of the citizens have power to rule. All soldiers and all Frenchmen who owned a certain amount of land were allowed to vote for leaders. These leaders were put in two houses, like the American Senate and House of Representatives. In France, though, the houses were called the Council of Ancients and the Council of 500. Together, the two houses chose 5 men to belong to a committee called the Directory. The Directory ruled France. The Directory's first job was to protect France from the country of Austria, which had declared war on France during the Revolution and was still trying to invade it. The Directory needed one of France's generals to lead the French army in an attack on Austria. The general they chose was named Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte had already earned a name for himself. Several years before, Robespierre had sent Napoleon to round up hundreds of Frenchmen loyal to the king in the south of France. Then Robespierre had ordered them all killed. So Napoleon turned his cannons on them and then guillotined the rest. "If a man has to take sides in such a battle," he told his brother later, "he might as well take the victorious side. It is better to eat than be eaten." Napoleon Bonaparte would do anything to be on the victorious side. When he got his orders from the Directory, Napoleon marched his army down into Italy. At that time, Italy was a whole collection of separate little states, and Austria controlled most of the northern part, the part close to France. If the French army could drive the Austrians back, France's border would be safe. Napoleon's troops were sick of fighting. They were hungry and ragged, and their salaries hadn't been paid for months. They muttered and complained and wanted to go home, but Napoleon was ready to whip up their fighting spirits. "Soldiers," he cried, "you are hungry and naked, but we are going to rich towns where you will find honor, glory, and wealth. Be courageous, and you will have these things." Filled with visions of untold wealth, the soldiers followed Napoleon into battle. The Austrians were forced to retreat. Napoleon took control of northern Italy and announced to all the Italian people that France had come to set them free from their Austrian captors. "We come to break your chains," he shouted. "We have quarrels only with the tyrants who have been holding you captive." Then Napoleon ordered all of Italy's great paintings and statues sent back to France to be put in the Louvre in Paris. Napoleon also announced that he respected the Catholic Church and would not rob any churches. But he would take their gold and silver vessels and their priceless paintings and keep them safe. Perhaps it was then that an Italian saying became common: "Not all Frenchmen are robbers, but a good many sure are." Then Napoleon led the French army on toward Vienna, the capital of Austria. Vienna had stood against the Turks, but the Austrians didn't think they could beat back Napoleon. They gave him the countries of Belgium and Lombardy and swore a peace treaty with him. Napoleon marched home in triumph. He was invited to parties and feasts, parades and ceremonies. He insisted that he had acted only for the good of France and its government. But to his close friends he scoffed, "I am but at the opening of my career. Do you suppose that I have gained my victories in Italy in order to advance the lawyers of the Directory?" The 5 members of the Directory knew perfectly well that Napoleon wanted power for himself, so they told him that his next task was to invade Great Britain. Napoleon knew that invading Great Britain was the best possible way to get himself killed. Britain had the strongest navy in the world, and the French army was weak and tired. He suggested that it would be better to invade Egypt. After all, the Turks who ruled Egypt had never been friends of France. The Directory agreed. Egypt was far away from France, so Napoleon would be gone a long time. Napoleon's men sailed down to Egypt. Meanwhile, the admiral of the English Navy, Admiral Horatio Nelson, heard from his spies that the French were heading off to attack something. He sailed through the Mediterranean looking for Napoleon. He wanted to make sure that the French weren't attacking any English colonies or possessions. Meanwhile, Napoleon landed in Egypt and invaded the cities of Alexandria and Cairo. "I have come to restore your rights and fight against the Turks who hold you captive," he told the Egyptians. "I respect Muhammad and the Quran far more than they ever did." But Napoleon didn't have much time to enjoy his victory. The British Navy finally caught up with him. The two navies fought. At this Battle of the Nile, most of Napoleon's ships were captured. Napoleon left his soldiers behind, boarded a small ship, which sneaked past the British Navy in a thick Mediterranean fog, and sailed back to France. When Napoleon returned to Paris, the French, who weren't really sure what had happened in Egypt, again hailed him as a hero. Napoleon was ready to take control. With armed soldiers behind him waving their bayonets, Napoleon marched into the Council of Ancients and announced that the Directory was now too weak to protect France. Seeing all the bayonets, the Council of Ancients agreed, quickly, to remove the Directory and replace it with 3 consuls, just as in ancient Rome. Of course, one of the consuls was Napoleon himself. And it wasn't too long before Napoleon became the only consul of France. Some French citizens knew that they had exchanged a king for a dictator who would use his soldiers to do exactly as he pleased. But France had been torn by war, bloodshed, and suspicion for so long that most French were simply grateful that someone was going to bring some order into chaos. Napoleon himself believed that the French would give him power as long as he gave them safety, strength, and enough to eat. "A republic?" he remarked to his friends. "What a notion! The French are infatuated with the idea of liberty, but it will pass away in time. What they want is glory and the gratification of their vanity. As for liberty, of that they have no conception."